everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Training for Endurance Races Amid Social Distancing, brought to you by Sports Health at NYU Langone. Before we begin, please mute your mics or telephones. If you would like to submit a question to the experts, please type them in the Q&A box on the bottom right corner of your screen, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A part of the presentation at the end. We would like to thank Lifetime and the New York City Triathlon, for which NYU Langone is an official healthcare partner in planning today's topic. I am pleased to introduce you first to Alex Garcia, Event Race Director of the New York City Triathlon, to kick off with an important message.
Thank you, Michelle, and to NYU Langone Health for hosting today's webinar. So times are crazy. COVID-19 has created some challenges across the entire endurance sports world, and thus has shifted the way athletes are training for races in 2020. Whether you're a pro or an elite endurance athlete or running your first race, we all need to shift our approach to training for traditional methods. COVID-19 may be disrupting these traditional approaches, but it should not prevent you from being ready to compete at your personal best. Today, the panelists are going to discuss the ways that you can adjust your training programs to fit the changing schedules and social restrictions. We at Lifetime appreciate your patience and understanding as we navigate these new challenges in the partnership with national and regional and local authorities. We are committed to communicating any decision to cancel or reschedule an event as soon as the decision is made. We realize that many of our athletes travel to our events from around the world, out of town, and based on this fact, we will update you with a minimum of 4 weeks notice so that you have sufficient time to adjust your travel plans. It is our goal to create incredibly memorable experiences for the Lifetime community and for everyone's health and sanity. We look forward to the day when we're all able to meet at the start line once again. Lastly, on behalf of Lifetime Fitness, I would like to thank NYU Langone Health for their partnership with the Verizon New York City Triathlon and Lifetime Fitness. Now back to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Alex. I'm now pleased to introduce you to our speakers. Dr. Guillem Gonzalez-Lomas is a sports orthopedic surgeon and assistant professor at NYU Langone Health. Heather Milton is an exercise physiologist at NYU Langone's Sports Performance Center. And among his many accolades, we have four-time Olympic triathlete Hunter Kemper. Thank you all for presenting today, and please tell us more about yourselves and your background.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. So I'll start since I'm the leftmost guy on the slide. So as Michelle said, I'm Dr. Guillem Gonzalez-Lomas. And I should just mention, by the way, to just thank Lifetime for this great partnership. And just a little bit about sports health. The goal of sports health is to provide triathletes and basically any athlete that's training for endurance races with tips on how to train for those races amidst these unusual circumstances. So that might mean training at home, on certain future social restrictions, any changing event calendars affecting the length of training schedules. But on that note, basically, for me, I am really passionate about the triathlon sports. I grew up competitive swimming, ran a couple of 240 marathons back in the day. So it's something that's been very near and dear to my heart. And New York, surprisingly, is a hotbed of triathlon training. So I've ended up seeing a lot of triathletes in my practice.
And I'm Heather Milton. I'm a clinical exercise physiologist at the Sports Performance Center at NYU. And I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Lomas with the Sports Health Initiative over a period of time. And now I'm excited to start working with Lifetime and athletes like Hunter as well. So what I do most of the time at the Performance Center is work with endurance athletes, rotational athletes, and others on identifying the best program and plan to achieve their goals with their history, their movement mechanics, and fitness level. So in these trying times, I've had a lot of experience now in adjusting the plan and working with athletes to identify new goals and new strategies.
I'm Hunter Kemper. I'm a four-time Olympian in the sport of triathlon, and I'm excited to be on this panel with such great sport health experts. with NYU Langone and Lifetime in this partnership that they've kicked off this year. It's great to have this webinar and have access to all of you guys out there and during this very difficult time. I started racing, turned professional in 1998, did my very first triathlon back in '86, maybe a little bit longer than some of you guys out there. Been doing racing triathlons for a very long time, and I've been to 4 Olympic Games. I've won my fair share of lifetime events in Minneapolis, Battle of the Sexes. I was the champion there, and then I've won New York City Triathlon as well. So I've swum in the Hudson River, like all of you guys, maybe many of you guys have, and Chicago as well. So I'm excited. I'm a big believer in what Lifetime's all about and what this partnership is all about. So I'm excited to be a part of this webinar. Thanks a lot for having me.
And well, these are the main points we'll be going over for this presentation. We're going to leave plenty of time for questions and answers, so please do enter any of your questions as we go, and we'll be sure to answer as many as we can. I'm going to jump right into it and just say, you know, what is the new norm? I don't think that any of us have really identified exactly what that is, and it keeps changing too. You know, we might find out things from Alex or otherwise soon. So I just want to kind of introduce this topic and say that all of us do have to adjust in some way, but we can think of it as a positive opportunity to kind of take some initiative and look at things a different way and potentially maybe grow and improve our training because of it. So I want to open it up to you, Hunter, and maybe you can share a little bit of anecdotal information on what you've done in the past or maybe currently to adjust to obstacles in your way of training.
Yeah, you know, I think my biggest obstacle for me in the way of training is my 5 children. That's probably my biggest hurdle that I have to get through each and every day. And so for me, I get up early in the morning, try to get on maybe an indoor trainer ride or go out for a run, either on my treadmill here in my workout room or outside. But for me, I've been able to kind of cut down the length of time in which I'm actually training, so I can actually have time spent with the family as well, helping out around the house, doing schooling, stuff like that. So I don't think we need to be training such long distances in order to accomplish our fitness goals, maybe in this difficult period that we're in. So it is a new norm for all of us. Racing is going to be totally different. It's going to look totally different down the road, at least maybe this year. And but there's definitely opportunities for us to advance in our fitness and advance in our fun and creating an enjoyment around just the idea of being healthy and fit and well. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? We can always have a goal of what we want to race for and train for, but the enjoyment comes in seeing the satisfaction and just being fit and healthy and having that general feeling of health and wellness. And so for me, that's what it's all about. Now that I'm retired, I retired 2 years ago from the sport of triathlon, no longer racing elite. So I'm going head to head with you guys now.
Yeah.
Gonzalez, look out, you and I.
Not quite head to head.
Come on. It's head to head. All right, so I want to get to this next slide. Dr. Gonzalez-Lomas, do you want to talk about just in regards to pool safety? What people, I mean, I get this question asked a lot. Are pools open? If they're not open, when they do open, is it going to be a safe environment for us to get back into? What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get that all the time as well. You know, I think the take-home points are, you know, what authorities are worried about with pools are the fact that, you know, a lot of people congregate around them, right? So it's the number of people, it's the groups and the crowds that they're worried about. That is what confers the risk. And I think some of us have this sort of mental image of getting in a pool during this time and, you know, being part of some COVID soup. But the reality is, it seems that if you look at the data, evidence shows that this is a very unstable virus in an aquatic environment. It does not survive in water well. It does not survive chlorine very much at all. So, you know, pools themselves, being physically inside the pool, should be safe. It's just a matter of, you know, figuring out a way to do that so there isn't a big aggregation of humans in close proximity. And so that's going to be the challenge in, you know, getting pools open. But certainly, you know, open water swimming, if you're able to do that, and I know, Hunter, you're going to talk a little bit to that. You know, that's safe. You know, the water itself seems to be quite safe as a place to you know, exercise.
So you would say the biggest, just to follow up, the biggest risk factor might be that congregation at the end of the lane going into the next set at the, you know, when we're all boxed into one area waiting for the next send off in a master swim group. Is that what you're kind of talking about? So it's going to be less people in lanes spread throughout the pool.
Absolutely. And you can, and this is again something that's going to be very locally and regionally specific, but you can imagine a pool that sets up a bunch of individual lanes. Which actually has been a personal dream of mine here in New York City, where the lanes can get pretty crowded. But that might be one way to kind of separate everyone. And like you said, make sure there aren't 5 or 6 people all in that same small area at the end of the lane.
And maybe you have people at either ends of the pool, right, where they stop at one side versus the other. You're not all in one area. So.
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious to know, as someone obviously where, swimming has been such a foundational aspect of their training, what advice would you give people who don't have access to pools now? There are parts of the country where pools are closed. Maybe they don't have access to as much open water swimming. What things can they do to kind of maintain that baseline swim fitness without actually being able to swim?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that. I feel like asked a lot during this time, during this coronavirus COVID-19 situation that we're dealing with. For me, the positive news is that we're all in this together, really. I mean, ultimately, we're all losing fitness at probably the same rate. I mean, there's not a whole lot of pools open around the country. So your neighbor or your friend, and out in California or wherever is not going to have access, just like you're not going to have access right now, probably to many pools in the US. So what do you do to stay fit? I would say the number one option is open water swimming. Maybe there's a lake nearby. Maybe there's a location, maybe the ocean that you can get into. Maybe there's a location you can be swimming in an environment in open water that's safe and that's friendly. That simulates the race situation anyways, right? We're gonna be swimming in a situation that's an open body of water. We don't do many triathlons in pools. I mean, there are a few that maybe do it in clubs, maybe like Lifetime could put on. But there's not many triathlons that are done with pools involved. And so open water swimming is by far, if you have access to that, jump in there, do it, start doing that. Do it with a friend, go out with someone, meet up with someone there and bring a wetsuit. That's all gonna be stuff and simulating the situation that you're gonna be in. So that would be my number one. I typically wouldn't be open water swimming a lot in my professional days. I'd be always in the pool for the most part. I get out there maybe a few times a month. But now I would be out there quite a bit. Just going back to the slide, Heather, in regards to the other options, you can also bring up. You can swim in a small pool, like maybe it's a neighbor's pool, or any kind of access to some kind of pool that you have. You bring a training belt, you tie it to your waist, hook it up to a fixed thing outside the pool, and you can swim kind of stationary, right? Like almost like at a treadmill that you're not going anywhere. Stretch cord, safety cord belt's an option there, and then dry land swim training, stretch cords. I've got a set. If you guys don't have a set of stretch cords, it's something that I would recommend getting for sure. You can simulate the swim motion, and there's a picture of a pair of stretch cords right there in the slide right there. You can simulate that motion and create that resistance as if you're swimming in the pool. It's not the same, right? But you can get a 15-minute workout, a 20-minute workout in and create that same kind of force that you might get into the pool. And you can focus on certain parts of your stroke. Maybe you want to focus on the back half of your stroke, the triceps, working that. Maybe you want to focus on the lats, the first part of your stroke, that front quadrant part of your stroke, which we all struggle with. That's where we bring the elbow and we slide our elbow back too fast, as opposed to keeping it up high on our first part of our catch. Those are the things you can work on with a set of stretch cords. So if you don't have some, now's the time to go out and get them and simulate a swimming workout.
That's excellent. And I think that answers a lot of the questions that have been popping up so far in our Q&A feed. So I hope we're getting some questions answered along with the slides as well. It's great. Okay, so one thing that is open is outside. So we can still do some cycling and running.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, our sport, we're blessed in the fact that our sport's a socially distant sport, really. I mean, we do a lot of it outside, and cycling and running outside. I mean, I can go to the doctor on this in regards to asking this question, but I believe it's very low to no risk in regards to training outdoors, as long as you're not in a big cycling group, right? You're not going to go on your Saturday morning ride with 60 other athletes and meet up and all congregate together, right? But if you're going out on your own, maybe with a buddy that you do and you guys kind of spend some time apart or whatever, but it's a sport to whereas it's not going to be, it's very low transmission rate, I believe, outside when you cycle or when you run. So it's not a situation that you really have to worry about an environment being unhealthy. Would that be correct, Doctor?
Yeah, absolutely, Hunter. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the webinar. But like the pool, it's very unlikely if you look at the evidence that's out there. Really, indoor environments are the high risk places. That's where a lot of those droplets, eventually, find some surface to lay on. It's very unlikely if you're on your own running or on your own cycling. I mean, look, I assume anything is possible, but you're talking about order of magnitude low risk of getting or transmitting the virus.
And you're talking about not wearing a mask when you're out there for a 40-mile ride or a 30-mile ride and you're in the country, you're out riding around, and you're not going to be around a significant amount of people. You wouldn't have to be wearing a mask. Would that be correct? I don't currently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll have, Heather kind of chime in on this as well. I would, really strongly discourage the use of a mask if you're doing, high intensity or even medium intensity aerobic exercise. Basically, what the mask is doing is it's making the work of breathing a lot more difficult for you. It's not hypoxic equivalent training. It's not altitude training equivalent. It's basically just making it harder for your diaphragm to pull in air from the outside. And so it can actually, if you are wearing a mask, you get out of breath. It can make some people potentially dizzy, lose their balance. And really no need if you're doing it on your own or in an area that doesn't have a high concentration of people. Heather, can you speak to that? I know, a few years ago, there was this trend of altitude training kind of simulation masks, and you see people at gyms and running with, what looked like a gas mask. Any evidence to support that?
No, and it's funny. I'm seeing a lot of these masks now that actually do look very similar to that people are wearing around. And no, that's kind of the overall physiology behind that is you want to actually live at a high altitude and train at a low altitude rather than training for a short period of time with something that's supposedly simulating that and then, going about your day without making the actual adaptations that are needed that are occurring when you're at higher altitude. So, yeah, great point to bring up.
I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Olympic City, USA. I'm coming to you now, and that's high altitude. And at the training center, at the Olympic Training Center, we have a room that we bring it down to sea level, and as if we're training, as if we're in biking along on the Henry Hudson, in that area in Central Park, so down in sea level. So for me, you can have the best options, like you said. You want to live high and then train low is ideal. But for me, I'm not wearing a mask when I go out. Indoor cycling training can be a good alternative if you live in this current environment, but also if you live in an urban area. You don't have to go as long on your indoor rides to get the same fitness response. And then also Lifetime has on-demand cycling and fitness classes that you guys should check out and know about. They're great classes to take, and get a good workout in a short amount of time. So.
Let me follow up with one question to you, Hunter. So in respect to the question that was, or the thought that was mentioned before about training just on your own or maybe with one buddy, I know that there's a lot of questions out there of how to stay motivated when you're not doing your team training. Have you found any tricks of the trade in order to be able to do that yourself?
Yeah, I think it's create training groups, right? Create buddies, create friend groups, community groups, whatever form you want to do it to whatever platform you want to use, or if it's just a texting group. But I think that's the biggest way to stay motivated for me. Is to maybe for me, like I'll text my buddies or email my buddies and say, here's my workout for the day. And then they'll come back in and say, here's our workout for the day, in a day or two in advance. So I think you want to have people to hold you accountable. And ultimately in this environment, we don't have physical races to actually hold us and have that star and that goal that we have out there that on this date, I'm going to complete this race. So we have to have other people hold us accountable. And I think it's friends, it's family, it's other training buddies. Our sport is so inclusive, and that's why it's difficult in this time, and that we can't be around others and be socially non-distant, right? In this thing, I mean, we want to be around and be with others. But I think I would say virtually have training buddies that you connect with, have groups that you connect with, that you can train with. Maybe it's in your garage doing a workout, right? I know my friend Nate, my little buddy Nate in Georgia, who's on today. He's doing that right now. He trains with his teacher, comes over, and they have their separate areas that they go and they try to train outdoors together, you know, kind of thing. So I mean, it's holding each other accountable, and I think if you have that accountability, then you're going to be in a great situation. As far as
great. Yeah, and I'd add to that also using some technology. So if you have something that tracks you, then you can, you know, sharing it with your community, so you have proof, you know, you have to do it because they'll be looking to see if you've completed it. So that's another tool that you can throw in there too. I wanted to go over a little bit about all the other things that we can start to think about outside of the actual cycling, running, and swimming that can maximize your performance and reduce your injury risk when you do start. If you're not at full capacity doing all of the training that you're used to right now, there's other things that maybe you put lower on the priority list. And I'm not talking to you, Hunter, specifically. I'm talking about the group in general. Like doing the dynamic warm-up and paying attention to all the muscle activation and range of motion and all of the increases in metabolism that happen during the warm-up that can help maximize the training that you are doing. And we'll talk a little bit about the quantity and quality, making sure that we're doing more quality training during this time. Getting a quality workout is much easier to do if you do a dynamic warm-up. So
can you just briefly explain the difference between like static stretching, you know, the old school way of thinking, just, you know, going and touching your toes and yanking your arms back or whatever, as opposed to what a dynamic stretch looks like? I mean, obviously pictures.
That's such a great question, especially because a lot of the endurance athletes that I work with tend to do static stretching because it's, you know, it's what you did in track in high school, and it's what you know, and it feels good. But we have a lot of information and scientific evidence now that static stretching before you go out and train or race is actually disadvantageous to you. So it actually tones down your neuromuscular activation, and you want to turn on that nerve conduction to the muscle before you start. So doing dynamic movements, it doesn't have to be incredibly long. You can see here only 5 to 10 minutes. We have strong evidence to show that will decrease the work or how hard it feels to do the same pace of training just by doing a short amount of warm-up beforehand. And for swimming, this definitely involves warming up your shoulders, not just doing static stretches of the shoulder joint, but, you know, activating the muscles that support the shoulder to stay stable while you're swimming. For cycling and running, it's very similar, looking at your glute activation, hip range of motion, knee and ankle range of motion, to make sure that you can move through that full range that you need for the sport itself.
Yeah, I think you said it best when you say you want to wake up the muscles, right? You want to get them moving and kind of getting firing before you go out there and work them out. So well said.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'd like to throw it back to you too and talk. You mentioned before a little bit about technique drills and swimming. So some tricks that maybe you're using at home to work on your form and your technique when you're not out there actually doing your rides and your runs.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, for me, I mean, swimming, again, the stretch courts is a great way to do that, kind of, you know, put force and focus on that front half of the swim stroke. You know, I mean, I think a lot of swimmers have a hard time kind of dragging the elbow through as opposed to keeping it up high, you know? So, I mean, I think those are things you can do with the stretch courts. On cycling, I tend to focus on, for me, as a cyclist, on a lot of us, we all tend to focus on the push down part of the pedal stroke, right? We're always kind of pushing. And the advantage is the fact that we actually have pedals, or we have cycling. I mean, if you guys don't have clip-in like shoes, cycling shoes and clip-in pedals, doctor, you got those as well when you go out for your rides?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'm just checking. If you don't have those and you're on the webinar, maybe you can go out there and get them. And the benefit of that is basically allows you to activate the hamstring. Like we can work on the upper part of the stroke, right? We can work on both halves of the stroke. So for me, I'm always constantly figuring out, like, how can I make my pedal stroke more circular as opposed to down and then kind of like slowly having to just kind of flow through and not actually using the muscles to kind of work on that circular motion. And I think that bottom half of the stroke, you can almost think about like kind of scraping like gum off your shoe kind of thing, trying to get that off your shoe as you kind of bring it and pull it around. So one leg cycling drills on a trainer, on an indoor trainer is a good way to do that, right? And a lot of people have power meters now. If you have it for each pedal stroke, you can see where that power is coming through, and you can feel it when you do it, isolate it on a one leg situation. I think running is the same way. I mean, I think you constantly want to do running drills. You constantly want to be figured out. And for me, my biggest thing is I love to do strides at the end of an easy run, right? So I'll go out and run maybe 6 miles or 8 miles, or maybe it's only 2 or 3, whatever it is. You take maybe on a softer surface, or if you can't get a softer surface, just maybe 60 to 80 meters, that you do some kind of easy pickups. So it's kind of free speed, but it's getting that neuromuscular response that you're not, even though you're going on an easy run, that day you're still getting your body used to turning it over and having a quick turnover. Because ultimately, when you watch the fastest runners in the world, they don't plod along, right? When you're going sub 2 hours and you're breaking that in the marathon, right? Or you're going whatever you're doing, 2:14 for the women's marathon now, whatever you're doing, that turnover rate's probably about 100 per minute. It steps per minute, you know, on each leg, on one leg. So I mean, it's high, it's over that. And so the key is, even when you're running slow, even when you're going out for an easy day, you want to make sure that you're still having a quick and fast turnover and not just slowly plodding along at 70, you know, or 80, you know, steps per minute kind of thing. So you want to constantly make sure that you're always turning your legs over, even when you're doing easy.
You know,
Kind of mindfulness of your training, kind of like pay attention to what you're doing. I think also another thing that's great, and we know there's a lot of literature out there now on resistance training, and just precisely what you're saying, the efficiency and that neuromuscular control of the movement. If you do resistance training only 2 days per week, that's a huge benefit in terms of your efficiency when you are cycling, running, and swimming. So now could be an opportunity to do some of that in the, you know, in the safety of your own home. All you need is maybe a set of dumbbells or some resistance cords, and you can get a full workout that way as well. Paying attention to the muscle groups we mentioned before, making, you know, large muscle groups like your back, chest, glutes, legs, and that will just kind of optimize the plan, as the slide says, but also put you a little step above when you actually go back into competing with your neighbors who also don't have access to a pool and some of the training that we're missing nowadays.
You know, I like, Heather, I like how both you and Hunter sort of referred to it as an opportunity. You know, because I think sometimes you can get in that negative mindset of, what are the things that I can't do, you know, and I'm so limited. But actually, oftentimes, and this happens all the time after surgery, where the silver lining is that, you know, an athlete gets an opportunity to actually work on some of their deficiencies, that they were, you know, they were just too busy, you know, training and working out and trying to get PRs. And those are the things, you know, and some of the slides, the images that you're showing, you know, where you're working some of those core muscles and the stabilizers. I mean, that's fundamental for injury prevention. So, you know, to kind of reiterate what both of you guys said, you know, that resistance training and then working on these home training drills, that can actually make you a better athlete on the other side. So to use this opportunity, this time, as something to actually take you to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've had some questions in the question box about some of the types of workouts, or what should they be doing if they do have access to some swimming, biking, and running. So Hunter, do you mind going over a little bit of one of your favorite quality workouts?
I'll share. That's me in the picture. My wife thought that was funny to put a picture of me in there underneath the water. So that's me, if you can't really tell, with a cap and stuff on. This is one of my favorite. I have many favorite swim workouts. I've been doing it for a long time. Since I was 6 years old, I've been swimming. So, you know, 35 plus years. And this is one of my favorites, because it simulates what race day might feel like. And so it's an easy warm up. It's 2,500 meters in length. You can always shorten the overall length of the workout, right? It doesn't have to be 5,000 meters or whatever, but the main set is this, the crux of it. But you want an easy warm up, slow, easy build, and then 4x50 meters skull drill, 25 meters build 50 meters. So skull drill, I'll back it up here a little bit, but it's just when you have your arms out in front of you and you're just kind of going back and forth, taking your hands, right? Not like this. That's not a good way to swim, right? But you want them kind of more closed, taking your hands and going back and forth to get what it feels like, the pressure of the water, what it feels like on your hands, kind of going back and forth. So you do that for 25 yards, half a length, And then you come down and you build the next 25 meters. That's the general warm up, 8 by 50 meters descent intervals, 1 to 4, 5 to 8. And then the main set is 5 by 300 meters, 100 meters above threshold, right? So for me, when I'm in a race, that first 100 or 200 meters is going to be quick. And for you guys too, maybe it's not the speed that's different, but it's the anxiety. Your heart rate's going to be firing on all cylinders. I mean, you're going to be high heart rate initially just from the nervous energy that you have that first couple 100 meters. So what does it feel like to train like that? So you do 100 meters above what your typical threshold. You can't last that long, you know, in this set. The 100 meters is not supposed to be done for 100 meters at that length of pace. It's only for 100 meters above your threshold effort. And then you rest 5 seconds, catch your breath, and then go into 200 meters at threshold. And then you want to descend within those 5. So you start off with that 200 meters or 100 meters at a certain pace, and you get faster each one. You always want to finish with your last one being your best one. And then a 300 meter cool down. And then again, the things that you can focus on to get you to swim faster than your neighbor or your buddy in the lane next to you is head position, right? That's the crux of swimming, is that head position, right? We want to make sure that we're not swimming with our head up and out, like always looking down the way. When we do open water swimming, we tend to, where's the buoy? Where's the buoy? I gotta find the buoy all the time. So your eyesight's gradually up, as opposed to you want your eyesight down. And when you bring your chin down to your chest and your head position is level, it brings your hips and your back, your hips and your feet up, as opposed to when your head position is looking up, you're swimming like this to the water. So head position is so key. The catch, we talked about that first part of the swim stroke is key. And then core strength, right? The way you swim fast, and when you watch Michael Phelps and all these guys, Caleb Dressel, and all these guys swim really, really fast, Kaylee Ledecky, they spend most of their time on their side. So they're constantly whipping and using their core to go from side to side through the water. That's how you swim your quickest through the water, is to kind of go from one side to the next, to the next, to the next, as opposed to just going through the water like this on a very flat. So in order to get from side to side, you've got to activate and use your core, Heather. I mean, you got to use that. You got to have that be really strong. Swimmers have super strong cores in regards to their core stability and their strength in their core. So
yeah, thanks for the shout out to the core. So again, dry land training, work the core. And not doing sit-ups, but doing things that are going to include that rotational component and being able to stabilize and balance and powerfully move through those positions. And actually, can I ask you, how long would it take you to do this workout?
For me, maybe that workout is, I don't know, 45 minutes, less than 40 minutes.
Okay.
40 minutes. Again, if you only have a half an hour, maybe you cut the workout and you only do 3 by 300, you know, whatever it is. I was trying to scale it back down. I was thinking about what's Dr. Gonzalez-Lomas going to be thinking about? How far is he going to go in an hour? I was trying to bring it back down, right? Because typically I'm going 5 or 6K in my swim workout in about an hour and 15 minutes. Right. So I'm doing a little bit more, but I was just trying to bring it back down. The focus is the same, right? You want to focus on a few drills, some builds, and then the main set, just the idea of going hard and then setting back and then settling into your pace.
Yeah, and when you're doing, I mean, not everybody is an Olympic athlete out there. You're doing high intensity intervals like this, you don't need to do any more than 30 to 45 minutes, you know, at most. So it's great that you can adjust it for all of us kind of more average people out there.
Yeah, I've got 5 kids. I'm right there with you. I don't have much time in the water.
It's interesting too, you know, just to point out, I mean, and I think we've done a good job of focusing on the evidence in this this webinar. And if you look at the evidence, it's really fascinating. I mean, as someone who did, you know, age group competitive swimming as well, it was all about volume back then. I mean, and it was almost a point of pride, you know, do your 2-a-days, do your, you know, 10K a day. And the reality is now it pretty much case closed. You don't, I mean, we're still trying to figure out what the sweet spot is, but you don't need a ton of volume. And if you do quality over quantity, you can get the same effect. And so I think that's a really important, you know, point to have come across.
Yeah, absolutely.
I 100% agree. And there's a question, I know a question in one of our chats, it talked about, will this video be recorded? Is it being recorded and will be shared amongst all registrants? And the answer is yes, right? We'll be having this for all those that have registered for this webinar. It'll be available for you post. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, that's great.
My favorite cycling and running workout. It's a brick session. How many of you guys have done bricks? Heather, Dr. Gonzalez-Lomas, do you guys know what that is? Okay, it's a weird term, right? Brick. But when you cycle and then you try to go run afterwards, your legs feel a little bit different. They kind of feel like, whoa, what is happening right now? So you want to simulate exactly what race day is going to look like, right? We just don't go out and run on a track and just on our own and the run for a triathlon. We run after biking, either Olympic sprint distance, 20K, Olympic distance, 40K, 56.2 miles or 112 miles, right? An entire Ironman. So we're going to have to run off of that, biking that distance, whatever distance that is. So you've got to kind of get used to prepare your body to get used to it, so that on race day, you just don't show up and be like, I've never actually run off the bike. That would be a bad situation to be in, and I don't recommend it. That's why I'm recommending my favorite cycling running workout. It's a brick session. Again, the warm up, it's not long. This whole session is not going to have to be that long. It's 20 minutes of cycling and 5 to 10 minutes of running. That's it. Maybe it's 15 minutes of cycling and 5 minutes of running. It's not a super long warm up, but you want to build throughout. You want to make sure that you perform, you kind of get those muscles activated and dynamic stretching beforehand. The main set's going to be 3 sets of a 15-minute bike, quick transition, and straight into a 1 mile run. That's it. So you do it 3 times through. The cool thing about this workout, when you do it 3 times through, usually you think of a brick workout as I'm going to go bike 40 miles, right? And then I'm going to go run 6 afterwards or whatever. I'm going to go run 8 one time. You guys get to work on transitions, which we all know and love in the sport of triathlon. You get to work on those transitions 3 different times in this brick workout, because the clock does not stop in the transition area. I don't know if you guys realize that, but there's no one stopping the clock and having you just take a nap and, you know, get your pedicure in the transition area. You got to actually be going full speed. And so transitions are so key. Even if you're doing Ironman, they're so key. So you get to practice those transitions. Again, 5 to 10 minute active recovery between sets. Final set is just, our first set's below threshold, second set is at your Olympic threshold pace, and your third set is above Olympic threshold pace. So it's a 15-minute bike, quick transition, 1 mile run. Have a course set up around your neighborhood. If you can't do it in your neighborhood, outside, do it indoors if you have a treadmill and an indoor trainer. And then you cool down 10 to 15 minutes. And again, you just want to practice what you do on race day.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love this workout. I've definitely like practicing bricks myself. So,
well, you know, the good news here for everybody listening is, Hunter, you just gave away your secret. Okay, so this is all it takes to become a world champion and Olympic triathlete. The news is they have to do these workouts at your pace. But you know, Heather, we were just talking about quality over quantity. So obviously there can be too much of a good thing. Tell us a little bit about the role that recovery plays in between some of these, you know, high quality, high intensity workouts.
Yeah, so you know, your training is not just what you're doing on the bike, in the pool, you know, on the road. It's really everything you're doing as a whole, what you're doing as you're living. So, so in between is really an important time where you can kind of maximize all of the adaptations and the benefits from working hard in your training. And it's important to know if you are doing different types of workouts, including different types of intensities, that there's a different amount of time that you need to recover between each one. This is kind of a busy image here, but you can see that there's a difference in the amount of recovery needed depending on if you're training easy, adequately, or hard. So, you know, if you're going out and you're doing long training runs and going out the next day and doing another one, that's actually going to be a disadvantage to you in terms of being able to continue to improve. So we want to make sure that we're giving enough time. I have some quick little little durations here in terms of, for strength training, 48 hours. But if you're doing really high intensity over threshold training, you might need a lot more time. And this depends on your fitness level as well. And we had some questions related to stamina and fitness, and it really is individualized, but we know from the literature that at least 48 hours is needed for those high intensity bouts. And you should enjoy that time. That's a good time to think about all of the other things that are going to be impacting your performance and your injury risk. So sleep is one of the best things we can do. It should be part of the training program. And I know now there might be, you know, some challenges to getting a full or adequate night's sleep just because of maybe stresses and anxieties related to, you know, the situation an individual is in this period of time. But having the opportunity to really focus on getting quality sleep and doing what you can, having a sleep routine, giving yourself enough time to sleep if you can really contribute to, you know, the amount of performance and adaptation that you can have when you are doing your training. Nutrition, hydration are also very important. those are things. We have some questions on the hydration, especially if you're training in hot areas, making sure that you're getting at least 16 ounces of water when you wake up in the morning and throughout the day, and making sure you're hydrating before and after. But everybody's sweat rates is different too. So I like to use a quick technique of just weighing yourself before and after, like an hour training session, and seeing what the difference in your weight is. And then that's the amount of fluid you've lost, that you need to at least get that much back in afterwards. So if you are a super salty sweater, or where you see that you actually have a rim of salt, either like around your hairline, around your collar, then that's an indication that maybe you need to take some salt tabs or have some other supplement when you're doing your training, or have maybe even a higher salt diet. But that's a great thing to review with a dietitian, just to make sure that you're getting the adequate amount of electrolytes as well as fluids. And then let's talk a little bit about the environment and some other safety considerations and stressors. Dr. Lomas, do you want to touch on some of the things we've already started to allude to?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, the issue that is omnipresent now is the COVID pandemic. And look, as a species, we've had pandemics before, but never in a world that was so interconnected, and where truly information and misinformation was spread at warp speed. So I think it's good in these circumstances to kind of take a little bit of a step back and really get down to sort of first principles. And so look, a lot of this is going to be predicated by our local and regional governments as well. So a lot of what we want to do, and we talked a little bit about pools being closed. And maybe opportunities to run or bike, might be affected by that. But actually, if you go to the next slide, basically, I think that the other main thing is, like we talked about, if you are injured, you can't train, and so what we want to do is limit the amount of stress that we put on our bodies without recovery. And I think you really kind of focus on some great points in terms of recovery. And I throw this back at you. I mean, as an exercise physiologist, what are sort of like the kernels that people can take home as far as training to reduce injury risk?
Yeah, so training to reduce injury risk, we already talked a little bit about the preparation for training, and then all of the additional things in terms of like your fueling, your hydration, your recovery in between. We want to make sure that we're kind of marrying everything together. One of the main things I do is kind of coach athletes in a way, no matter what level of athlete, on balancing what is the best balance for them individually, not just what amount of volume is that training program has and how can they achieve it, but really what's the most reasonable for them, and can they get the quality in, and what does their cadence look like, or that fast turnover Hunter was talking about, their depending on their movement patterns, and how we can work on some form drills and technique drills, like we mentioned, to kind of tie it all together and make the best kind of training package that we can. So avoiding doing too much volume, kind of hard to coach sometimes. It's hard to wrap your head around that if you've been, your whole life used to just doing more and more volume. It's not always more is better, that there's some balance in between there. And then also, this can be a time where you consider it more of a periodization stage. So we don't want to be going all out all the time year round. You want to have some time for breaks, and maybe we've had a few weeks of breaks here now of staying at home, and now it could be a time to ramp back up and kind of rebuild your base and start with building like a really strong foundation. So you don't need all the volume if you do everything else right. And Dr. Lomas, we had a question about training in Central Park. If you need a mass training in Central Park, because it's so congested there versus other areas.
Right. And so that's where it's going to be very specific to where you are. And I think you have to be judicious. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to make decisions where there may not be somebody right there to tell you if it's a red or green light. But quickly, let me just go over. We talked briefly about the information that's out there. I think the CDC is still really a great repository of the information that has been validated. And what I'm talking about here is, not that latest article that was a preprint article that was forwarded to you by your, friend from high school. It's the stuff that we now have, multiple articles over several months supporting and validating. And so what we know about this virus is it tends to be transmitted by airborne droplets, and those are typically transmitted in the air. Yes, they may lay on some surfaces, and that's where it's important to not touch your face very much. And actually, that's where a mask may be very helpful, because it'll prevent you from touching the parts of your face where the virus can enter. So that's the stuff that we know. All these other stories and anecdotes about transmission, they're still we're still waiting for I would say the jury's out. We're waiting for the definitive evidence on that. And like we talked about before, very low risk of outdoor transmission and no evidence of transmission through water. It's just, congregation and groups. That's the problem. So I think to answer the question about Central Park, you got to play it by ear. I mean, if you're running and you're able to maintain a good, 6-foot distance from all the other runners, I mean, it can seem crowded, but if you know that you're kind of at your pace, you're able to maintain distance, I think you're totally fine. I think if you're doing a dry land workout, next to 20 other people and you're all, within 2 feet of each other, that could be more problematic.
Yeah, for sure.
So to just kind of keep going on that, this is what you have to do to stay safe. The main thing is that physical distancing, certainly wearing a mask when you're not exercising. And look, you can have, there's cloth face coverings that people use that they're able to sort of like pop up and pop down as needed. And so that's great. So if you're doing an interval workout, maybe you have that so that, when you're resting, you have it on, but when you're actually working out, you don't. Because again, there's no reason to be unnecessarily hypoxic while you're training, and it's potentially dangerous. And then obviously, make sure that you're, washing your hands after working out, and just in general, try to do that fairly often. But always remember that this is an evolving scenario. So as time goes on, we have more and more information. We have more information about how the virus is spreading or not spreading. And obviously, when we look back to, our fun races, like our lifetime triathlons of the past, this is not the picture of social distancing. So this will likely look somewhat differently in 2020 or 2021, whenever races resume. And I think you can really be reassured that Lifetime is prioritizing safety. So they're going to make decisions based on both the clinical evidence and also on regional governance. And look, how this is what form this is going to take. And Hunter, you could kind of speak to this too, because, you've been in a lot of different types of triathlons. This might take the form of, a different start. So more of a time trial start, more separation, maybe fans have to be excluded temporarily, until we have more of an understanding. Any thoughts on that, Hunter?
Yeah, I think the race directors have done a good job in regards to, they're really working hard to figure out a way in which to create an environment that's safe for all. And, and I know one of the questions, Kevin even said, do you think the New York City trial will go ahead? Kevin, earlier on in the webinar, we had Alex get on. You can relook it, and once we're finished talking, you can kind of check out the webinar again. It'll be stored there for you. You can relive it. He basically said that they're still in a holding pattern with the city, trying to get this race off the ground. They don't know for sure whether or not the New York City trial is going to happen, but they're trying to create an environment where it's going to be safe for everyone, and they feel comfortable that they can pull it off. It's just whether the city can give them the go ahead. So that's kind of where they're at. Just go back to some of the questions. But yeah, it's going to be wider shoots, right? It's going to be, time trial starts. It's going to be smaller waves and wider waves. It's going to be transition areas. It's going to be more spread out in the transition area. Maybe it's going to be a limited number of fields. It's going to be smaller fields potentially, not as large of fields initially. So there are going to be some things, precautions. It's going to be virtual race briefings. These are all the things that are going to happen, that might happen, that in order to get these races off the ground. And I think they can happen safely. It's just going to take some time to kind of put those necessary steps in place. So this next slide is great. Again, we talked about what can we do to stay connected? How can we have a goal? And I think virtual triathlon racing, if you guys haven't seen it and you haven't checked it out, USA Triathlon, the governing body of our sports, is putting out some races. Other Ironmans putting out some events as well. And the cool thing about doing a virtual triathlon, it gives you flexibility. You can do it over the entire weekend. You don't have to do it all together. And they're supplementing the swim because we can't get into pools, right? Maybe with another run. So we're making it really virtual duathlons, a run, bike run. And the distances are different, right? There's multiple distances. They could be a sprint distance or Olympic or a half Ironman or even a full that you could potentially do at home if you had that capability, right? Or that stamina. So the virtual triathlon racing is something that's picking up, and they're you can do it on a trainer or outdoors. You can do it on a treadmill or on a trail, as long as you have a device that you can measure time and distance with a smartwatch or a GPS enabling device, fitness tracker, and you can upload your race to the platform that they're using. I think it works. And if you don't have that, you actually just want to, you just got your old watch and you got your distance that you measured in your car or whatever, and you got your little 5-mile loop you do around the house or around your neighborhood, you probably can put that in as well. I don't know what they're giving out awards and what different races offer and how they do it. I don't know if you can get an award based on just, submitting your time and your distance or whatever, but it's able to happen. It's a cool environment. It keeps people accountable, and it keeps people goal-minded to be like, there's something I can actually shoot for. And that picture was in Minneapolis for the Lifetime Fitness event. I wanted to use that for the Battle of the Sexes race. So, race.
So this slide, just to kind of finish up, it's both the light at the end of the tunnel and a bit of a cautionary tale. So in North America, only one professional sports enterprise has actually held events thus far, and that's the UFC with mixed martial arts. They held in Jacksonville last week. And, they had an amazing protocol. We actually helped them, and consult with it. The problem is, theory is not always the same as practice. And so there you see, Joe Rogan not wearing a mask, shaking hands with a fighter. So the good news, I think, for triathlon is when races actually start, you'll have had some templates already and things that worked and things that didn't work. And that hopefully is going to maximize safety at all these events.
To answer a couple of questions that I saw when I talked about my workout before we even go to the question and answer here that are online on the webinar. Chris Stewart asked me, what does threshold mean specifically? And threshold's different for everyone, but what threshold, the term threshold pace means is how long can you sustain that effort, right? That speed on a bike, that minute per mile on your run, 6-minute miles, 7-minute miles at your running pace for that specific length and distance of the race. So if it's an Ironman, right, your threshold is going to be much lower because you have to bike 112 miles. So your average miles an hour or your pacing, your threshold pacing is going to be much lower. Whereas if it's a sprint race, it's going to be faster, right? Or an Olympic distance race for me racing, my threshold run pace was about 440 per mile or 445 per mile off the bike. So trying to get myself, that's what I mean by threshold. What can you sustain for a certain length of distance that you're training for in that type of race? And then active recovery, what does that look like between the workouts, between the sets? Is that it's just not sitting down on the curb and just waiting the 5 minutes out and taking deep breaths and then going again. It's moving around, it's walking around, it's doing some hip swings, some leg swings, and being active, getting back on the bike, spinning your legs a little bit if you're indoors, or if you're outdoors, kind of getting back on the bike again, getting ready to go to your next set of the brick workout. So I want to kind of come back to those things. Drew Lovell asked active recovery and Chris Stewart asked threshold. So.
Yeah, and in terms of how you feel, okay, like how out of breath, because for someone who's maybe starting out, it's hard to find that level, right? What would you recommend in terms of like the intensity, how it feels, how maybe how difficult it might feel? What are some kind of keys that you can look at to identify where you might be in terms of threshold?
Well, I think ultimately it's it's going to feel somewhat uncomfortable. I mean, in a sprint race, it's going to feel probably really uncomfortable because you're only going 12 miles on the bike and you're only running 3 miles. It's not that far for many of the people on the webinar, so it's not that great. So it's going to feel like you're pretty out of breath, ultimately. And that's something you can play around with when you're on the treadmill, right? If you don't really know your pacing and kind of compare your pacing, you can just program that into a treadmill when the gyms open back up, or if you have one at home, and program your pacing and say, how long can I run this? Let's see. I can gradually tick it up a little bit. And my secret for all you guys in regards to running fast is that you always want to make sure that your last half of your run, if you go out and do a 5K for your race after biking, and that's a sprint race, or a 10K for the Olympic distance, make sure the last 5K is faster than your first 5K. Because if you do go out too fast and you go over your threshold, doctor, like if you go considerably far over, you're going to come to a state where you're starting to build up a lot of lactic acid, and then your returns are going to be going like this. And then you're going to start slowing down, walking on your run the last half. So you always have your fastest runs when you can back half it and have your second 5K be faster than your first K, or your second half marathon be faster than your first half marathon for the full marathon distance. If you look at all the world records, when they're on their pacing, the women's world record in the marathon, she ran it in Chicago, she ran it faster that second half. She closed better in that second half marathon than she did in the first half marathon for the full distance. It just works that way, especially in running. And it can get pretty ugly, I think, as we all have experienced. If you go out too fast and you try to close, it can be a real, I mean, exercise physiology, Heather might know what your body's going through, but it's not a pleasant sight.
Yeah. So there was another question on quality, what that actually means. And I think, my apologies if we didn't make that clear. I think we were coming at it from different angles, but thinking about it from your technique and your form and the quality of how hard you're working. So rather than going out and just slogging and doing as many miles as you can, doing the threshold training and the training that's really purposeful and will get you a lot of benefits from doing it and return on investment.
Yeah, exactly. I would say, it's being able to focus. I mean, it's very hard to focus for 2 hours. It's a little bit easier to focus for 45 minutes. You can really kind of do, try to work on everything from technique to intensity.
Yeah. You want to have your workouts be purposeful in all that you do. What's the goal? What do you want to accomplish with this specific workout?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So let's jump into some of these questions. I think we've already answered this one. Do you want to be wearing a mask for 6 hours while running your 26 miles? No.
No mask.
Okay, training in hot areas. We did talk about this. There were a few questions more specifically about, do I need to take Gatorade, this and that. That is very much individualized, and we do offer nutrition services at NYU, and we're able to do telehealth, which is really important now. So if you have really specific questions and you want to go over them with a sports nutrition dietitian, then that's an excellent way to really get everything on point. I don't want to punt that question, but I also don't want to give you an answer that's not specific to your needs.
Yeah, and if you're training in hot areas, he had it dead on. You want to get up early in the morning. You don't want to be out long, extended period of time in a hot and humid environment. I mean, it's difficult to train like that. It's hard to recover after situations like that when you put yourself in that environment. So get up early in the morning, late in the evening when the sun's not out is a better area to be.
And this one I think we touched on too. So
Yep.
Get motivated, virtual training.
I would say treadmill. I mean, how do you run on pace by yourself versus a group? If you're used to groups kind of keeping you going, is that just jump on a treadmill when the gyms open back up, or if you have one at home, or a neighbor has one, whatever, that you can have access to a treadmill. Set a certain pace and practice that, and just practice. Okay, this is what I usually run. It's forced training. I mean, the belt's going to go a certain speed. You just going to have to maintain that. So you can kind of shut your mind off and work it that way. So I'd say jump on a treadmill just to kind of get a barometer about you being solo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hunter and Heather, any thoughts about this one? We'll kind of have this be our last question, but any recommendations on how to do a virtual triathlon and this is very pragmatic. If you're used to being able to do a little pit stop, but every single public facility is closed, what are maybe some troubleshooting tips?
I think my biggest troubleshooting tip is that I would basically say do it closer to home in regards to maybe do more loops, right? So say it's an Olympic distance race and it's 40K. You're doing 8-mile loops, on the bike, or and use your home as the facility that you could use. You're right, it is difficult. And on the run too, I would not do an out and back where you bike 100 miles out there and you get 50 miles out, 50 miles come back, and you have no access to anything that you could use as far as facilities to go to the restroom or to nutrition stops or whatever it is, if you don't trust it. So I would say just stay closer to home if that's possible.
Yeah, it just takes a little bit of adjusting and different planning. Other options could be like if you live in an area where you have friends nearby, you could plan your route to be close to them if they don't mind you taking a pit stop, or having some some snacks or water available. So there's ways to work around it. So it just takes a little bit more thought and planning, but definitely still doable.
Guys, it has been an absolute blast. And again, would just like to thank Lifetime for partnering with us for this webinar. If you would like to access any Lifetime on-demand classes, please visit their website. They're at www.lifetime.life. And you can also schedule an in-office appointment or video visit with our doctors at nyulangone.org/sportshealth, or call our telephone number. If you're a Lifetime member, you can receive access to our physicians at nyulangone.org/lifetime, and we can coordinate your care with our physicians and services. And truly a thrill to be on the webinar with both you guys, Hunter and Heather. Thank you so much. And to everybody else, have a great day.
Have a great day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us.